My daughter looked me straight in the eye, smiled politely in front of 20 guests, and said, "Mom, could you please stay upstairs tonight?" The room went quiet. She laughed softly, as if she just made an innocent joke. I mean, everyone's from Ethan's side of the family. They're not really used to. She glanced at my faded cardigan before finishing the sentence. This. Not you. Not Mom. Just this. Then she leaned closer and whispered the sentence that changed everything. "Honestly, you're embarrassing the family." For one long second, I couldn't hear the music anymore. The laughter downstairs faded into silence. I simply looked at my daughter. The little girl I'd once carried on my hip while working double shifts. The child who used to wait by the apartment window every evening because she refused to eat dinner until I got home. Now she couldn't bear being seen with me. I smiled. Not because it didn't hurt, because it hurt too much. Then I quietly answered, "If that's what you want, sweetheart." She sighed with relief. "Thank you, Mom." She thought she'd won. She had no idea the roof over every single person's head belonged to me. Not her, not her husband. Not the prestigious family she was trying so desperately to impress. Mine. And before sunrise, everyone in that house would know it. My name is Eleanor Brooks. I'm 66 years old. People usually notice my hands before they notice anything else. Wrinkled, rough, covered with tiny white scars from 40 years of sewing clothes that other women proudly wore to weddings, galas, and charity dinners. I've stitched dresses worth more than the first car I ever owned, yet I've worn the same sensible shoes for almost 12 years. Funny how life works. The people who create beautiful things rarely get credit for them. We're simply expected to disappear after the work is finished. I suppose that's why disappearing had become second nature to me, until that night. I wasn't always invisible. When Lily was little, I was her entire world. Her father died when she was 6. A heart attack. 43 years old. Healthy. Or so everyone believed. One ordinary Tuesday, he kissed us goodbye. By Wednesday afternoon, I was signing funeral papers while trying to explain death to a little girl who kept asking when Daddy was coming home. People say children are resilient. That's true, but resilience has a price. Someone has to absorb the pain they don't understand. That someone became me. I sold my wedding ring. Then, our second car. Then every piece of jewelry I'd ever owned. When the money disappeared, I learned to sew professionally. At first, I worked from a tiny apartment. One machine, one lamp, one customer. Patterson from 3 streets over, who needed curtains, shortened. She paid me $12. I remember crying after she left, not because it wasn't enough, because it meant I could buy Lily milk without borrowing money. 1 customer became 3. 3 became 10. 10 became a waiting list. Before long, brides from across the county were bringing me their wedding gowns. Eventually, local boutiques hired me to handle alterations no one else could manage. I wasn't famous, but among people who understood craftsmanship, my name meant something. Still, needles don't make headlines. They simply keep families clothed. Lily grew up surrounded by fabric. She learned multiplication sitting beneath my cutting table. She fell asleep to the sound of sewing machines instead of bedtime stories. Sometimes she'd crawl into my lap at midnight. "Mom, aren't you tired?" "Very." "So why don't you stop?" I'd kiss her forehead. "Because dreams are expensive." She never forgot those words. At least, I thought she hadn't. When she graduated from college, I cried harder than she did. She became the first person in our family to earn a degree. Marketing. Bright. Ambitious. Confident. Everything I'd hoped she'd become. Then she met Ethan. He was handsome. Polished. Born into a family that had never worried about grocery bills. His parents lived in one of those neighborhoods where every mailbox looked expensive, where lawns stayed perfect because someone else mowed them, where conversations somehow always included vacation homes. His mother, Patricia, never directly insulted me. Women like Patricia never do. Their cruelty wears perfume. "Eleanor," she once smiled, "Lily says you're very talented with sewing." I nodded. "I've made a career out of it." "How sweet." She sipped her wine. I suppose every family needs practical people. Practical. The kind of compliment that quietly reminds you exactly where someone believes you belong. Lily noticed it. I know she did. At first, she defended me. My mother owns her own business. Patricia smiled. Of course she does. That smile. Always that smile. As though ownership only counted if your business occupied a glass office building, not a workshop. Little by little, Lily changed. Nothing dramatic, just small things. She stopped mentioning my business. Instead of saying, my mom owns Brooks Bridal Alterations, she started saying, my mom works from home. Then later, my mom's retired. Retired? I was working 6 days a week, but correcting her felt small. So I stayed quiet. That's what mothers do, or at least, that's what I believed. 3 years ago, Lily and Ethan bought the most beautiful Victorian house I'd ever seen. White columns, wrap-around porch, huge maple trees, a place that looked like it belonged on Christmas cards. Everyone congratulated them. They're homeowners. They've done so well. Even Patricia bragged endlessly about their success. I simply smiled because I knew something nobody else did. They hadn't bought that house. Not really. I had. You see, the owner had been one of my oldest clients, Mrs. Margaret Holloway, a widow, no children. I'd altered her clothes for almost 25 years. Near the end of her life, she called me one afternoon. Eleanor, I want to ask you something. She explained that she wanted to sell the property quietly. No real estate agents. No public listings. She hated attention. I'd rather it stay with someone kind, she said. I didn't have enough savings. Not then, but she offered something unbelievable. Owner financing. No bank. Tiny monthly payments. Almost no interest. The opportunity of a lifetime. I bought it. Quietly. Legally. Every document. Every signature. Every tax payment. Mine. Months later, not calm, when Lily and Ethan desperately needed a home, I made them an offer. Live there. Pay what they comfortably could. No pressure. No public discussion. No embarrassment. Just family helping family. The title stayed in my name. Not because I didn't trust Lily. Because every lawyer I'd spoken with told me the same thing. Never give away the roof over your own head while you're still alive. I listened. One of the smartest decisions I ever made. Although, I never imagined why it would matter. Until tonight. As guests filled the living room laughing over expensive wine, I quietly climbed the staircase. Exactly where my daughter had asked me to go. Behind me, someone closed the dining room doors, as though sealing away the embarrassment. I entered the small bedroom I'd been using since moving in temporarily after hip surgery. The music downstairs continued. Glasses clinked. People laughed. Nobody noticed I'd disappeared. Except one person. I heard soft footsteps outside my door, a gentle knock, then a familiar voice. Eleanor? It was Mrs. Alvarez, the elderly neighbor from across the street. I saw what happened. I opened the door. She looked heartbroken. You shouldn't be up here. I smiled. It's only for one evening. She looked directly into my eyes. No, she whispered. It's your house. I stared at her. She knew. Of course she knew. She'd signed as one of the witnesses when Mrs. Holloway transferred ownership years ago. Mrs. Alvarez gently squeezed my hand. They've forgotten whose kindness they're living inside. I looked toward the ceiling, listening to my own daughter laugh downstairs. Then I quietly answered. They're about to remember. Mrs. Alvarez left quietly. Before she reached the staircase, she turned back one last time. You don't have to keep pretending. I smiled. I know. But tonight isn't about proving who owns the house. It's about discovering who deserves to live in it. She nodded without another word. When the bedroom door closed, I stood alone. The music downstairs drifted through the floorboards. Laughter. Wine glasses. Someone complimenting the chef. Someone else admiring the renovations. Our daughter and Ethan have such beautiful taste. I almost laughed. Taste. Almost every curtain in this house had been sewn by my own hands. Every custom table runner. Every embroidered pillow in the guest rooms. The dining room drapes everyone kept praising. I'd stayed awake 3 nights, making them as a surprise. Not one person knew. Not because I wanted recognition, because Lily had asked me not to mention it. People don't need to know you made everything, Mom. Just let them think we hired a designer. At the time, I'd agreed. A mother learns to swallow small hurts. She tells herself they're only scratches. Eventually, you stop noticing you're bleeding. Around 8 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was Lily. Can you bring down the extra dessert plates? No, please. No, Mom. Just another task. I stared at the message for a long moment, then carried the plates downstairs. The dining room looked like something from a magazine. Candles, crystal glasses, fresh flowers. Patricia sat at the center of the table like a queen hosting court. Lily smiled brightly as I entered. There they are. She took the plates without looking at me. Patricia laughed lightly. Oh, good. We were beginning to think our little helper had gone missing. Several guests chuckled politely. Helper, not mother, not homeowner. Helper. Lily said nothing, not one word. That silence hurt more than Patricia's joke ever could. I quietly placed the remaining plates on the buffet. As I turned to leave, Patricia stopped me. Eleanor, since you're already up, she gestured toward an empty wine glass. Would you mind? The room became strangely quiet. She wasn't asking. She was testing whether I'd accept the role she'd assigned me. Before I could answer, Lily spoke. It's okay, Mom. You don't mind helping for a minute. Helping. Again. Always helping. Never belonging. I picked up the wine bottle, filled Patricia's glass. Then the next. Then the next. Nobody thanked me, because people rarely thank someone they've decided is beneath them. As I reached the end of the table, one elderly gentleman smiled kindly. I don't believe we've met. I'm Harold Bennett. I shook his hand. Eleanor Brooks. He smiled warmly. And how do you know the family? Before I could answer, Patricia answered for me. Oh, Eleanor's Lily's mother. She used to do sewing. Used to. As if my life's work had been a hobby she'd kindly remembered. Harold looked confused. I thought Lily said her mother owned a business. Patricia laughed. You know how children exaggerate. The table laughed with her. Everyone. Except Ethan. He shifted uncomfortably. His eyes met mine for only a second. There was guilt there. He knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Dinner continued. Conversation turned to investments, vacation homes, private schools, stock portfolios, topics I knew little about. Not because I wasn't intelligent, because my investments had always looked different. A sewing machine, a second machine, a delivery van, a workshop, eventually, a house. Real wealth isn't always loud. Sometimes it arrives disguised as sacrifice. Then, Patricia asked the question she'd been waiting all evening to ask. Eleanor, when are you planning to move into assisted living? Forks froze. Even Lily looked surprised. I answered calmly. I hadn't planned on it. Oh? Patricia smiled sweetly. I just assumed. You know, young couples deserve privacy. Lily lowered her eyes. She didn't interrupt. Again. The silence. Always the silence. I'll leave when I recover fully, I replied. My hip is getting stronger every week. Patricia tilted her head. Still, it must be difficult relying on your daughter. Relying. Interesting word. I almost corrected her. Instead, I simply smiled. We help each other. She nodded. How lovely. Though her expression suggested she believed exactly the opposite. Dessert arrived. Chocolate torte. Fresh berries. Coffee. The mood relaxed. Then Ethan's younger brother, Mark, wandered into the foyer, chasing his little son. A soccer ball rolled across the hardwood floor. The little boy kicked it too hard. It bounced directly toward an antique porcelain vase sitting near the staircase. Mrs. Holloway's vase, the only decoration I'd never replaced. Crash. The vase shattered across the floor. Everyone gasped. Mark immediately stood. Oh, no, I'm so sorry. Patricia frowned. Oh, well. It's only a vase. Only a vase. I looked at the broken pieces quietly. Mrs. Holloway had once told me, if this house ever belongs to someone who doesn't value memories, the walls themselves will know. Funny, I suddenly understood what she meant. Lily hurried over. It's okay. We'll replace it. I knelt carefully, despite my hip, picking up the fragments, running my fingers across the blue-painted flowers. Mrs. Holloway had brought that vase back from Italy nearly 50 years earlier. It couldn't be replaced. Not really. The little boy looked terrified. I'm sorry, he whispered. I smiled. It was an accident. Then I looked at the adults. It's accidents we forgive. It's choices that matter. No one seemed to understand why I'd said it. Not yet. As the evening wore on, guests slowly drifted into the library. Patricia proudly offered tours of their beautiful home. Our architect suggested opening this wall. Our designer selected these finishes. Our decorator insisted on these colors. Every sentence made ownership sound more permanent, more deserved. She never once mentioned the woman who had quietly paid every property tax, every insurance premium, every emergency roof repair. Me. Near 10 o'clock, I stepped onto the back porch for fresh air. The garden lights glowed softly across the lawn. This had once been Mrs. Holloway's favorite place. I could almost hear her laughter. You kept your promise. I whispered into the night. I protected your home. Behind me, the screen door opened. It was Ethan. He carried 2 cups of tea. I thought you might want one. I accepted it. Thank you. He leaned against the porch railing. I'm sorry about tonight. I remained silent. I should have said something, he admitted. When my mother... I looked at him gently. Why didn't you? He sighed. I kept thinking she'd stop. I nodded. They rarely do. He stared into his tea. Lily isn't herself. No, I answered quietly. She's becoming someone else's version of herself. He looked toward the dining room window, where Patricia laughed loudly. I don't know how to fix this. I smiled sadly. Neither does Lily. Before either of us could continue, we heard Patricia calling from inside. Ethan, where are you? He closed his eyes briefly. I should go. As he walked away, I said something that made him stop. Ethan, when people are afraid of disappointing strangers, they usually end up disappointing the people who love them first. He looked back. For the first time all evening, I saw tears in his eyes. I watched him disappear into the house. Then I reached into my cardigan pocket. My fingers touched a small brass key. The original key Mrs. Holloway had handed me the day ownership transferred. I'd carried it every day since. Not because I needed it, because it reminded me of something. A house doesn't belong to the loudest voice inside it. It belongs to the person willing to protect it. I closed my hand around the key. Upstairs, inside my bedroom, sat a locked cedar chest. Inside that chest, calm, was a blue folder. Inside the blue folder, Ma, was every deed, every receipt, Ma, every tax payment, every signature, proving exactly who owned this house. And before this weekend ended, someone would force me to open it. I hardly slept that night. Not because I was angry. Anger burns hot. This felt different. It felt like the quiet that comes before a storm you've spent years pretending wasn't coming. By sunrise, I was already in the kitchen. Old habits never leave you. Coffee was brewing before 6. Cinnamon rolls were in the oven. Fresh fruit sat in a crystal bowl. Even after everything, I still wanted everyone to wake up to breakfast. That's what mothers do, even when their hearts are breaking. One by one, the guests drifted downstairs. The smell of cinnamon filled the house. Several complimented the breakfast. One woman smiled warmly. Eleanor, these are the best cinnamon rolls I've ever tasted. Did Lily make them? I smiled. No, I did. She laughed. Of course. I should have known. It was one of the few genuine compliments I'd received all weekend. Lily heard it. For just a second, I saw guilt cross her face. Then, Patricia entered. The atmosphere changed immediately. Some people don't raise their voices. They simply carry tension with them. Patricia looked around the kitchen. So, has everyone packed? Several guests nodded. Most planned to leave after brunch. She smiled. Wonderful. Then she turned toward me. Eleanor, I think this would be a good day to discuss living arrangements. The room became strangely quiet. Lily froze. Ethan looked down at his coffee. I already knew where this conversation was going. Patricia folded her napkin carefully. We've all been trying to avoid an uncomfortable subject. She smiled politely. But I think honesty is kindness. I nodded. I agree. She seemed pleased. This house simply isn't designed for 3 generations. Lily and Ethan deserve privacy. They're newly married. She paused. I think it's time you found somewhere else to live. No one spoke, not even Lily. I looked at my daughter. She couldn't meet my eyes. Lily? I asked softly. Do you agree? Her fingers tightened around her coffee mug. She stared into it for several long seconds. Then, almost too quietly to hear, she whispered, I think it might be best. Those 6 words hurt more than every insult Patricia had thrown at me. Because they belonged to my daughter, not Patricia. I nodded slowly. I understand. Patricia smiled with visible relief. I'm so glad we're all being mature. She leaned forward. We've actually looked at a lovely retirement community only 15 minutes away. She slid a glossy brochure across the table. As you can see, they have gardening, game nights, transportation. It would really simplify everyone's life. Everyone's. Interesting choice of words. I picked up the brochure, looked at the smiling elderly couples on the cover, then quietly folded it, placed it back on the table. I'm not moving. Patricia blinked. I'm sorry? I said, I'm not moving. The kitchen fell silent. Patricia laughed softly. I don't think you understand. This isn't really a request. It isn't? No. She folded her hands. Lily and Ethan own this home now. They're entitled to make decisions about who lives here. I looked toward Lily, still silent, still looking down, still letting someone else speak for her. Then Patricia made the biggest mistake of her life. She pushed the brochure toward me again. Eleanor, sometimes dignity means knowing when you've overstayed your welcome. That sentence echoed through the room. Overstayed. My welcome. In my own house. Something inside me became perfectly still. Not angry. Certain. The same certainty I'd felt years ago, signing the purchase documents. The same certainty I'd felt every month, mailing another payment. The same certainty I'd felt climbing onto ladders to paint these walls myself. I looked around the kitchen. Every window, every doorway, every floorboard. I remembered choosing every one. And suddenly, I wasn't looking at strangers in someone else's home. I was looking at strangers sitting inside mine. I stood, slowly, carefully. My hips still ached, but my back had never been straighter. I'll be right back. No one stopped me. They assumed I was going upstairs to cry. That's what they'd expected all weekend. Instead, I walked to my bedroom, opened the cedar chest, lifted out the blue folder. The folder Mrs. Holloway herself had handed me years ago. Inside were dozens of documents. Purchase agreement, title deed, insurance records, property tax receipts, every payment, every signature, every legal record, neatly organized. Because that's how I had always lived. People who build things themselves learn to keep paperwork. It's often the only proof anyone believes. Before I closed the folder, my phone rang. The screen read James Carter, my attorney. I smiled faintly. Perfect timing. Good morning, James. Morning, Eleanor. I received your email yesterday. Everything all right? I looked down at the folder. I think today, I'm finally going to need those documents. There was a brief silence. Then James spoke carefully. Has someone challenged ownership? Not directly. Yet. I understand. I'll be available all day. And Eleanor, don't argue. Just show the facts. Facts don't shout. They don't insult. They don't seek revenge. They simply exist. That's why they're so powerful. I carried the folder downstairs. Nobody noticed it at first. They were too busy discussing vacation plans. Patricia looked annoyed when I returned. I hope you've had a chance to think. I have. I placed the blue folder gently on the dining table. What is that? She asked. My answer. She frowned. I don't understand. I know, I said quietly. But you're about to. Before anyone could speak again, the front doorbell rang. Everyone looked toward the hallway. Patricia frowned. Were we expecting someone? I smiled. No, but I believe. I've been expecting this moment for years. I walked calmly toward the front door, reached for the handle, and opened it. Standing on the porch, holding a leather briefcase, was Attorney James Carter. He smiled politely. "Good morning, Miss Brooks." Behind me, I heard Patricia whisper, "Why is a lawyer here?" I turned slowly, looked directly at my daughter, then at every guest sitting around the breakfast table, and finally, I said the sentence that would change every relationship in that house forever. "Because there's something all of you should know." James Carter stepped into the foyer with the quiet confidence of a man who had spent 30 years settling arguments using paper instead of emotion. He smiled politely. "Good morning." No one answered. Every eye was fixed on the leather briefcase in his hand. Patricia recovered first. "I'm sorry. And you are?" James extended his hand. "James Carter, attorney for Ms. Eleanor Brooks." The room became still. Patricia laughed nervously. "Attorney? I'm afraid there must be some misunderstanding." James simply nodded. "That's usually how these conversations begin." I walked back toward the dining room. The blue folder rested exactly where I'd left it. I placed my hand on it. Not dramatically, not triumphantly, just steadily. "Lily, I need you to listen carefully." She looked frightened now. Not angry, not embarrassed, frightened. Because somewhere deep inside, she had begun to realize the story she'd been telling herself didn't fit the facts anymore. James opened his briefcase. One by one, he removed certified copies of legal documents, purchase agreement, recorded deed, property tax statements, insurance policies, mortgage satisfaction papers, everything perfectly organized. He placed them neatly on the table. "This residence," he said calmly, "was purchased 14 years ago." Patricia folded her arms. "Yes, for Lily." James looked at her. "No, for Miss Eleanor Brooks." Silence, the kind that makes people hear their own heartbeat. Patricia frowned. "That's impossible." James slid the deed across the table. "It isn't. The property is titled solely in Miss Eleanor Brooks's name." He pointed to the county seal. "The ownership has never changed." Patricia stared, then grabbed the document. She searched desperately for another name. There wasn't one. Only mine. "Eleanor Brooks, owner." "No," she whispered. "There has to be some mistake." "There isn't," James answered gently. "The public record confirms it." I watched Lily. Her face had gone completely pale. She looked from me, to the deed, back to me. "Mom, you own the house?" I nodded. "Yes." Her voice shook. "But you always said—" "I always said it was your home," I answered softly. "And it was. There is a difference." She blinked. "I don't understand. I bought this house because I wanted you to have security. When your father left, I promised myself you'd never wonder where you'd sleep. So I bought the house, but I never wanted you to feel like you owed me for it." Memories flooded her face. Every birthday, every Christmas, every repair, every new roof, every broken furnace, every tax bill. She had never paid one, because every single one had quietly arrived in my mailbox and quietly been paid. Patricia suddenly stood. "This is ridiculous. If Eleanor owned this house, why didn't anyone know?" I smiled sadly. "Because I never needed anyone to know. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was trying to protect my daughter." James spoke again. "Ms. Brooks intentionally allowed Lily and Ethan to live here rent-free. For 6 years. There has never been a lease. There has never been a rent payment. There has never been any financial obligation requested." Patricia slowly sat back down. For the first time all weekend, she had nothing to say. Lily began crying. Not polite tears. Real ones. The kind that come when illusion collapses. You paid for everything?" "Everything. The roof after the storm? Yes. The plumbing? Yes. The property taxes? Every year. The insurance? Every month." She covered her face. "Oh my God," I thought. "I know," I answered gently. "You thought I needed you." She nodded through tears. "I never realized. You never let me." I smiled. "That was my choice. I wanted you to build your own life. I never wanted you to feel trapped by gratitude." Patricia suddenly interrupted. "Fine. So you own the house. Congratulations, but surely now you'll transfer it to Lily. There it was. Even now, ownership wasn't enough. She still wanted control. James looked at me. I nodded. He opened one final envelope. There is one additional document. He placed it on the table. My client's estate plan. Patricia smiled. I knew it. James continued reading. Upon Miss Brooks's passing, this property shall transfer equally, Patricia leaned forward, to Lily Brooks, the Foz, and the Eleanor Brooks Foundation. Patricia blinked. The what? I smiled. The foundation. I started it 3 years ago. Lily looked confused. What foundation? The one that buys homes for single mothers leaving domestic abuse. The room went silent again. I've already purchased 2, I said quietly. Third closes next month. Patricia stared at me. You gave away your money? I invested it. I corrected gently. In people who needed one chance. The irony hung in the room. Patricia had spent the weekend measuring status. I had spent years building safety. James closed the folder. There is one condition. Everyone looked up. The house transfers only if Lily chooses to keep the foundation operating. If she dissolves it, the property's charitable interest cannot be removed. Lily looked at me in disbelief. You trusted me with that? I always have. She walked across the room slowly, stopped in front of me. Then something happened that no one expected. She dropped to her knees, exactly where she'd stood 2 nights earlier, pretending not to know me. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I was ashamed of the wrong person. Tears ran freely now. I kept trying to earn acceptance, close, from people who never intended to give it. And I stopped honoring the woman who never stopped giving. I gently lifted her back to her feet. No, we stand together. I didn't raise you to stay on your knees. She cried harder. I'm sorry I called you an embarrassment. I placed my hand against her face. You weren't talking about me. You were talking about the fear inside yourself. And fear lies. Across the room, Patricia stood. No speech. No apology. Just silence. For someone who had spent an entire weekend judging worth by appearances, there was nothing left to say. She quietly picked up her purse. Ethan, she said, we're leaving. Ethan didn't move. He looked at his mother, then at Lily, then at me. I'm staying. Patricia stared. Ethan? I'm staying. My wife needs me. And? He swallowed hard. Mrs. Brooks deserved that from the beginning. Quote. Patricia's shoulders fell. For the first time, her son had chosen courage over comfort. Without another word, she walked out the front door alone. The sound of the closing door echoed through the house. And then, it was quiet. Not awkward. Peaceful. The kind of silence that comes after truth finally enters a room. Over the following months, everything changed. Not overnight. Real healing never does. Lily asked to learn every part of the foundation. She visited each home, met every family, listened to stories that reminded her where she came from. She never again introduced me as someone who used to sew. Instead, she proudly said, "This is my mother." She built everything we have, not with inheritance, not with luck, with work. One Saturday, we painted the 3rd foundation house together. A little girl ran through the empty living room, laughing. Her mother stood in the doorway crying. "I've never owned anything before," she whispered. I smiled. "I know the feeling." Lily squeezed my hand. Quietly, she said, "I understand now. No house is ever just a house. It's what someone sacrifices to build it." I looked at her and smiled. Exactly. Months later, I ran into Patricia at the grocery store. She looked older, quieter. She hesitated before approaching. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I judged you by your work." "You judged yourself by your title," I answered kindly. "I judged myself by what I built. Those are very different things." She nodded slowly. "I know that now." I wished her well, and kept walking. Some victories don't need witnesses, only peace. People still ask whether I regret keeping the truth hidden for so many years. I always give the same answer. No, because ownership isn't proven by having your name on a deed. Ownership is proven by showing up. by paying the bills no one sees, by fixing what breaks, by staying when leaving would be easier. The deed simply confirmed what love had already done. If there's one lesson this story leaves behind, it's this: never confuse quiet with weakness. The people who speak the least are often carrying the greatest burdens. And never measure someone's worth by the job they do with their hands. Sometimes those same hands built the very floor you're standing on. The day my daughter called me an embarrassment, she believed I had nothing. By the end, she understood I had given her everything. Not because I owned the house, but because I never stopped making it a home.